Hi Nancy, this is History of the Heartland with Nancy Peterson. And Nancy, we're going to talk a little bit about your a long history here in Decatur. You grew up your early childhood in Decatur. In which neighborhood were you in when you grew up?
I grew up in the southeast part of town. It was the corner of Cleveland and Webster. Wait a minute. Southeast corner of Cleveland and
So
Webster. The house is
you
still
were
there.
you were close to Mueller Park then.
A couple blocks north of Mueller Park.
Couple blocks
It
north.
was downhill. It was a great skate to go down that hill.
Okay. And what was Mueller Park, that area, like at that time?
It was very much blue collar, middle class. Um, yeah, we had, I think the kids I went to a parochial school, but I think the kids were in Washington School at the,
Okay.
yeah, over on Maple
Washington
Street.
School is right next to Johns Hill.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was an integrated neighborhood.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was one of the well-known early integrated neighborhoods, mixed race. And so, but you went to school at St. James, which was
The Catholic school.
the Catholic school, kind of on the southeast.
Yeah, it was,
or east side of town, I
it was,
guess.
yeah, it was on, the corner of Webster and Clay.
Yes.
Actually, I think it was like maybe 6 or 7 blocks north of where we lived.
Okay. So did you walk to school then?
My mother worked, and so she dropped my brother and me off. I have a brother who's a year and a half younger.
Okay.
So she would drop us off on her way to work, but then we walked home. We were latchkey kids, and from 3rd grade on, it was my job to make sure that, my brother was herded home, and we would get in the house. I would call Mom to check in, and then I would start supper.
So tell us a little bit about St. James. What are your memories of St. James?
Well, of course, back then we had nuns.
Mm-hmm.
And the Franciscans from Milwaukee were the ones who staffed the school. The classes were very large. I think there were probably 45 or 50 kids in my class all the time.
Yeah.
But with nuns, it was very orderly.
Yeah.
And we would start every day with Mass at church and then walk across the street to the school for the school day. Most of the kids ate lunch at school. There was cafeteria ladies. Every school has cafeteria ladies. And then would walk home afterwards. On rainy days, my mom would pick us up and take us to work with her.
And that was right across the street from St. James, was it not?
St. James Church, yes.
St. James Church, yeah.
Yeah. My family goes way back. One of my great-grandfather was a charter member of the church.
Oh.
And so considering that my son was baptized there, my family's 5 generations at St. James. It was the German church that broke away from the Irish church, St. Patrick's. And the churches are not that far apart.
Yes.
They're only about 6 or 7 blocks apart. But my mother could remember in her childhood, which would have been in the 20s, they were still preaching sermons in German at St. James.
Fascinating. So you grew up there, and then later you moved away, but then you went to college at Eastern.
Yes.
But came back to Decatur after that.
Yeah.
And both you and your husband both worked in Decatur.
Yes, my husband worked at Federal Kemper. Well, it was just Federal Mutual Insurance at the time. And I worked a year at Eisenhower as the librarian. And then we moved away for a year, and I had another baby. And we moved back to stay in '67. And then in 1971, I went back to work full-time at Eisenhower as assistant librarian and transferred to MacArthur in '81 as head librarian, library director, whatever you want to call it, yeah.
So you had a long career at both of those high schools.
11 years at Eisenhower and 22 years at MacArthur. Thank you.
And they were both built at the same time.
They were.
And when you first went to work at Eisenhower, then it must have been a relatively new building.
Yeah, the building was only, well, let's see, I started in '65, so the building would only have been, 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah. So what are your memories of Eisenhower at that time?
It was very crowded. It was big. We generally had enrollments in the area of 1,700, 1,750, 1,800. All of the 2 new high schools, Eisenhower and MacArthur, had large enrollments. These were the baby boomers that were coming on. And of course, I think that's why the they were built in the first place. You know, they saw, because I know when I was in college, they were building dorms for the baby boomers who were coming along after us and were babies.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the enrollments were large. The classes, class sizes were in the low 30s, I believe.
And at that time, that's before any of the digital technologies existed.
It was.
Describe how, you know, how people found books.
The card catalog.
The card
catalog was my favorite thing. And of course the librarians. Librarians are invaluable because they kind of take root and they stay there for a while, and so they know the curriculum, they know the teachers, they know the collection, they know how things are going to go through the year, and so a school librarian was an invaluable asset to the curriculum, and of course they don't have them anymore. Don't let me get on that soapbox, okay?
So, and you would be working with teachers and with students on different types of research projects.
Yeah, and that was the really neat part of the job, is you worked with the teachers as much as you worked with the kids. So you got to know everybody and everything that was going on. My daughter, who is also a school librarian, says it's like the school bar where everybody comes and talks to the bartender. That would be the librarian.
Yeah. So you had the card catalog that would have a card for each
multiple cards.
There are multiple cards for each book, to different ways that were classified by subject or by title or by author, I guess.
Yeah.
Then there was the Dewey Decimal System.
Yes.
What was that?
Okay, Mr. Dewey, who is, you know, sainted in, I mean, librarians have t-shirts with Melville Dewey on them, at some point divided all of human knowledge into 10 classifications, or 10 areas, and assigned numbers, and it seemed to be fairly logical. You know, you started with the 0-hundreds, which is really kind of general, and then you go into the 100s, which is philosophy, and the 200s, which is religion, yada yada, and you keep on going. And then, of course, this way you've got books of like subjects in the same area in the library. And then the card catalog would have subject cards for those, but it would also have cards for books in other categories. For instance, you know, for a biography you would have a subject of the name, but you might also have a subject card for the time period, so that kids who are researching a certain time period, they get the history books, they also get the biographies, and sometimes they would get other things like science and that sort of thing. So it was handy.
Yeah. So then you moved in later to MacArthur as the head librarian.
Yeah.
At MacArthur, and so that was a little bit different role.
It was, and that's when technology started hitting us too.
Yeah.
Now at Eisenhower, back in the 70s, they had some kind of a deal with Staley's, where they got to tap into the mainframe. They had a couple of teachers in the math department who had connections there, and so the kids could actually work with the mainframe at Staley's then. When I got to MacArthur in the 80s, a couple of years later, we started with the Apple II computers. And from that point on, it was just, you know, half my job was technology.
Yeah. So technology was changing quickly, and it was hard to keep up with, I suppose. And all these connections were digitized.
Yes, and eventually, Decatur Public Schools joined the area library system. And eventually we did away with the card catalog, and the catalog was digitized also, and merged with all of those other libraries in the library system. I think at some point there were like 120 of them. Well, the Rolling Prairie Library System, which was our area library system, it also included Springfield. So we got all of those specialized state agency libraries. And there were company libraries, Staley's, Hanson Engineering in Springfield, and so the kids got to where they had access to like millions of books that we could get for them on interlibrary loan within a 3 or 4 day period. Okay. It's quite marvelous.
Yeah. Did that information eventually become online, or was that after your time?
A lot of it has been digitized and is available online now, particularly newspapers and journals.
Yes.
It is. It's kids today do not appreciate what a research paper used to entail.
Yeah. A lot easier to get information.
It really is, yeah. The only problem is that kids today also don't learn how to distinguish reliable information from junk.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is, you know, they started getting rid of librarians in the Decatur public schools just about the time they really needed them, back in the mid-90s, when the internet really was getting hot and weird stuff was on there, and librarians were information professionals. You know, they know how to distinguish, they know how to teach kids how to look beyond what is on the screen about who does this or who said this, what are their credentials, what are their biases, and you know, it's hard to teach kids that now, because there are no experts in the schools.
And that would have been about the time you retired then?
Yeah, I retired in 2003, and so like the last 7 or 8 years was the internet for me.
Yeah.
For a little while I was the school's webmaster, and that was fun too.
I can imagine. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for sharing those recollections of your career as a librarian in Decatur Public Schools and growing up in Decatur.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.